Welcome, everyone, to the College Promise Careers Institute. Over the next 3 days, you will hear from a diverse array of speakers leading the movement to reimagine education, training, and workforce infrastructures to better prepare students for rewarding careers and address the needs of today's ever-changing workforce. Building on the welcome from our incoming First Lady, Dr. Jill Biden, we now look at the reality of adapting our nation to the changing workforce. Work as we know it is being shaped by two powerful forces: the growing adoption of artificial intelligence in the workplace and the expansion of the workforce to include both on and off balance sheet talent. These trends have accelerated as the world responds to a global pandemic. Today, I am very proud to introduce our keynote speaker for Fireside Chat, Jamie Merisotis, President and CEO of the Lumina Foundation, and recent author for Human Work in the Age of Smart Machines. I am honored for his participation today. Jamie is a globally recognized leader in philanthropy, education, and public policy. Since 2008, he has served as president of both of the Lumina Foundation, an independent private foundation committed to making opportunities for learning beyond high school available to all. He previously served as co-founder and president of the nonpartisan Washington, D.C.-based Institute for Higher Education Policy, and as executive director of a bipartisan National Commission on College Affordability, appointed by the U.S. President and congressional leaders. Jamie's latest book, Human Work in the Art of Smart Machines, was released just last month. Welcome, Jamie.
Thanks very much, Rosie, and thank you. I want to agree with Dr. Biden in saying how important my longtime friend, Dr. Cantor, has been, Martha Cantor, to this work. So thank you for the invitation. Thank you for being here. Delighted to follow Dr. Biden on the stage. And I will say that I think the tenure of First Lady Biden and her ability to influence the debate about higher education could be one of the most interesting and exciting things that we'll see in the national stage in the next few years. Thank you for having me.
Jamie, I want to jump in because as we publicized your participation in our 3-day event, we started receiving a lot of questions. And as you can imagine, many of them were all about your book and what led to your book, and specifically around this notion of defining human skills and how are we going to define them as we see this change with artificial intelligence coming. I will say, as before you kick off, that I found your book quite optimistic, and frankly, you don't really get a lot of optimism when you talk about artificial intelligence. So I'd like to hear your thoughts with regards to this conversation around human skills and the optimism.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for seeing it as optimistic. That is my nature, Rosie. But I'll explain to you why I'm optimistic in a second, because I think it's really important to understand the intersection between what you said about human skills and that optimism about the future. I think many people who know Lumina know that we're an advocate for learning that's accessible, that's lifelong, and that prepares everyone for a global future. And so, if you think about education and training, this sort of sphere of post-secondary learning, they're complementary. They're complementary to each other, and they're essential to meet our nation's educational attainment goals. Lumina has been focused on increasing educational attainment to 60% by 2025. And that means that we're focused on all types of post-secondary credentials. We don't think that there is a distinction that should be made. In fact, we think it's a false dichotomy to try to separate education and training. So short-term credentials, certificates, industry-recognized certifications, degrees, et cetera, all that is really important. So, for me, I'm a first-generation college graduate, like Enoch, and I've spent my life at this intersection of learning and work, trying to make it more inclusive, trying to help serve more people, generally make it better for individuals in society. But, the question I think we're being asked in education is, what is education for? And my answer is, it is to prepare people for human work, the work that only humans can do. So, as you think about what you were saying about technology and AI, what they're doing is they're taking over more and more of the tasks that humans used to do. And so, machines are good at a lot of things: repetition, reducing things to an algorithm. But human work is the work that only humans can do. So now, we've got this global demand for skills. And I think the emergence of human work is placing enormous pressure on the way we prepare people for work and for life. And so, understanding how human work is different, I think, is the key to figuring out what we need to do to adapt our learning systems. And as I said, unfortunately, we have this distinction, this false dichotomy between workforce training, which is sort of some people think that's developing a specific set of technical skills and knowledge, and what people call higher education, which is something that prepares people for life beyond on work. But for the most part, I think that distinction is wrong. In preparing people for human work, it's obvious that neither training that is devoid of broader learning and education devoid of the preparation for work is going to give people what they need. So what we need to do is nurture our foundational human capabilities and give people the ability to develop those human skills that you mentioned. So what are they? They are the skills that underscore our human traits, like compassion and empathy and ethics, and our human capabilities, like our ability to collaborate and be creative and communicate, etc. At the end of the day, I think we're different than machines in a lot of ways, Rosie, but I think more than anything else, for us as humans, work matters. And so, I think for us, we're looking for social mobility and dignity and meaning in what we do. And so, that system for developing these human skills, helping people achieve that dignity and meaning through human work, I think that's why the work of what you do at College Promise is so essential, because we urgently need a continuous system for developing and deploying that quality learning that's going to prepare people for that human work and this new type of life in this age of smart machines.
So, Jamie, I want to build on what you're saying because I hear this from students across the country attending colleges and universities, but also adult workers that they're having to reimagine a new life, right? Because in many cases, their jobs are not coming back, especially after COVID. A lot of the underpinning of the angst, especially around this transformation, is really based on fear that human value is going to be abolished, that people will become irrelevant, that we're not going to be able to have a value proposition. But in fact, as we read in your book, but also as we look across the country, there will be a tremendous amount of value demand from humans as well, and new jobs that we've never even imagined could exist. Can you talk a little bit about, dealing, conquering our fear over the future and what's before us now?
Yeah, I think that fear is on the one hand well founded, but I also think there's something we need to do about it. Look, fear unfortunately is a part of what we are facing in the current environment. Right, 2020 is this year like no other. The pandemic, the outrageous incidents of racial injustice that we've seen, the ways in which our economy has been upended, severe unemployment, etc. It has led to a lot of feelings of uncertainty, and that uncertainty and fear is well founded. By the way, that uncertainty and fear is also something that can be exploited. Part of what we've seen in this rise in authoritarianism is the exploitation of fear of change, fear of the other, a fear of difference. And so those kind of things I think are really important. But what we have as humans is our ability to develop our talent and deploy it in ways that will make a difference to us as individuals and to society at large. And here I think what College Promise is doing is so important, because I think what you're doing is creating the opportunity for people to understand that we need to actually develop and deploy our own talent in ways that are concrete. In other words, don't just go to school and then say, now I'm going to go and get a job. Continue to develop your knowledge, skills, and abilities. Continue to develop that talent. That's the key. I mentioned earlier that for us as humans, the thing that's fundamentally different than the machines is that work matters to us. Part of what we get out of work is this desire for meaning and value. In fact, there's interesting data, and you read the book, so you know this statistic, that even for the lowest income individuals, they say they will trade off some money for meaning. In other words, this desire for purpose, for dignity in work is really important. So we have to develop our human traits and capabilities in work, in formal learning contexts like colleges and universities, in community-based organizations, and in any way that we can, not just once, but over the course of our entire work lifetime. To me, that is an optimistic view of the future, because what it means is that we can work together as individuals, as employers, as policymakers, as society, in actually crafting this new human work ecosystem.
On the opportunity, I mean, to speak around this idea of conquering fear, I think it is a very American concept that we are a courageous culture, right? I mean, we will rise to the occasion again and again. And now we're in a point, an inflection point in America where we're asking higher education and training and workforce preparation providers to also rise to the occasion, right? Because we do need to reimagine how we navigate and connect future workers and students to a new economy, um, a new meaning and purpose. You know, I worked with veterans for many years who transitioned from active duty military into veteran status, and they would trade off a lot of personal gratification for meaning and purpose because that is part of what drove them, initially to serve their country. I think workers can, as you're saying, will find some tremendous gains made as we refine this idea of purpose and value in future careers. How do you feel this idea that you're putting forward is being embraced in higher education? What can higher ed and institutions, preparing future workers? How can we start addressing this more holistically?
Yeah, well, I don't think I think you're absolutely right what you said, and I don't think it's hyperbole to say that I think the entire system has to adapt to meet the needs of these I'll call them these learners as human workers. So, one of the things Lumina has a new strategic plan. We refresh our plans every few years, and one of the things that we point out in the new plan is that this rising demand for talent in American society has never been more urgent. Again, this confluence of the pandemic and racial injustice and other things, I think has exposed the challenges that we're facing in society. And yet, to overcome those challenges, we know what we need to do, right? Quality of life, measured by income and civic participation and personal well-being, is highest among people with a college degree or another credential of value. So, as human work evolves to require the sort of broader knowledge, skills, and abilities that are needed, it has to be signified in the credentials that these colleges and universities produce. So, in rethinking the college experience, I think the colleges and universities are going to have to highlight three key things. They're going to have to put equity first, right? We have seen too much stark leadership failure, a system specifically designed to disadvantage people of color from getting the education and skills that they need. So we have to put equity first in the system, not in the margins, but as a central feature of what we're doing. We have to focus on what people know and can do and make sure that those credentials, those degrees, those certificates, those certifications increasingly focus on those human traits and capabilities, both from a content and generalizable perspective. And again, as I mentioned, we have to make sure that that system is a virtuous cycle, a cycle of learning and earning and serving others and eroding, I guess, the distinctions among them. We should be thinking about learning integrated work and work integrated learning and all the variants of that in this system. The colleges and universities need to understand that the system center is not them as the providers. The system center is the learner workers. They are the system, and the other actors in the system, the employers, the policymakers, the college and universities, have a role to play in advancing these learner workers, these human workers, over the course of their entire lifetimes.
And I'm happy to hear you say that because you're actually putting, again, the user experience of the learner at the center, right? Their experience matters, understanding the various student personas. It is not a monolith, right? Learners are not a monolith themselves. So how do we connect them? How, to these new opportunities? How do you feel? I'll ask this question because it seems to be, it comes up time and time again. You know, can we really maintain a competitive edge as America, as a country, as Americans in general, without pivoting right now? I mean, has COVID really just? I mean, to me, we've just accelerated what was already happening, what was already taking place. But what can we do to really maintain this competitive edge? Or do you feel like we're on the right path? I mean, or do we need to shift again very rapidly?
I mean, your point is the correct one, in my opinion, right? Which is that this is fundamentally an issue of acceleration of the trends that we've seen. So, look, for example, at the ways in which college and universities were being asked to respond to the needs of the learner workers. Some were doing it, some were not. We saw an escalation in terms of the consolidation and merger of higher ed institutions before COVID. And I think that will accelerate as a result of it. We saw a deepening interest after many years of some in American higher education resisting this idea that we prepare people for work and for life. We saw some acceleration of the college and universities saying, we get it. We're doing, we are preparing them for jobs and for work, not just for life. But all of these things have been accelerated as a result of COVID and racial injustice. And I think that I'm hopeful that America is going to remain competitive. I think, I say this in the book, but again, back to your point about my optimism, I guess, there's a lot of evidence to support the view that technology is going to create millions of new jobs. The fact is, on the one hand, in the race between technology and skills, historically, technology has always won, but technology has always created more jobs than it destroys. And I think that may be true in the future, but in the future, the work of the future is going to change almost everything that we take for granted about those jobs and employment. And so, as a sort of long-term recovering policy nerd, Rosie, I'm really hopeful that our intentionality on building those human traits and capabilities, what I call our durable skills, are going to be instilled in the public policy making process. They're going to be seen as assets of the workers and the employers in these public policy programs. And that's where this issue about work being about meaning and contributing to a greater whole is so important.
So building on the role of, we both agree, education adjusting to the needs of learners has to change, but that there's the other dimension, which is employers, right? They have needs. They certainly are having to remain competitive. And in my conversations with a lot of employers and companies that are sourcing talent, across many different, jobs and fields, they seem to really be focused on doers and deciders, right? They're really pivoting to, are they hiring people in a doer role or in a decider role? And I think that's, that kind of thought process leads to a lot of the fear and confusion. You talk in your book about different groupings of human skill. And I'm wondering if you could talk, because I find that much more optimist than basically putting somebody in an A and B bucket of either a doer or a decider. Could you talk
Yeah.
a little bit about that?
Yeah, I agree. I'm not sure I'd cleave the world into two buckets. I think that part of the problem with two buckets, of course, is that they tend to be seen as haves and have-nots,
Right.
and so I think that's problematic. But as I said earlier, human work is blending those human traits, right? Compassion, empathy, ethics, etc., and those human capabilities, communication, and collaboration. So those are all necessary to solve the complex problems in the dynamic settings of work. I think what's going to result is a workforce being made up of what I see as four archetypes of human workers. You saw this in the book. I call them helpers. These are people who are engaged in occupations that involve deep personal interaction with people. So, therapists, people working in customer service, things like that. Bridgers, people who are working in occupations that involve the connection between people and technical tasks and systems, like sales managers. Integrators, who work in occupations that involve the integration of knowledge and skills from a wide range of fields and applying them in a really personal way. So teachers, social workers, etc. And then creators, people who are involved in work that's both highly technical and purely creative, game developers, choreographers. I tell the interesting story in the book about a professional wrestler who I call a creator, who had to sort of reinvent himself. But my point, I guess, is that human work is less about specialized expertise in one task or set of tasks. And I think that, you underscored the point here that we can't afford as a society to let those who don't fit into a bucket end up being lost or dropping out, is really important. So, my point about, as humans, we need work, we desire work is really important. Work offers us something that is more important than simply a job, than a paycheck. It is about that meeting. So, we need to help people become better helpers and bridgers and integrators and creators Again, not simply once early in their life when they're expected to be in the schooling phase of life, but throughout their entire work lifetimes. That's the continuous virtuous cycle of learning, earning, and serving that I think is so important.
I think your comments lead to what we've received. I would say it's the number one question that came to us for your talk, which is from teachers and students and those organizations providing support to soon to be adult workers, right? Young workers, and those serving older workers that are trying to reskill. But there's a fear, especially in young adults who are saying, what am I going to do now? COVID has just pretty much changed the game for them. So they're sitting there thinking about what will their junior and senior year of high schools be? What will their freshmen in college, or they're participating in a training program? And there's a level of anxiety around what should they be doing today. Do you have a message for them? Are there some words of wisdom that you would convey to them as they think about preparing for their future career?
Yeah, I think it's really important to both address your short-term needs, right? So you have an urgency that I understand that's really important, but also think about the long-term plan. And I say that to the learners, the learner workers. I say that to the employers. I say that to those of us who are influencing what they do, like policymakers. I think the key is to develop um, as an individual, or if you're an employer for your employees, a sort of cohesive plan for rethinking how you're going to learn, earn, and serve over the course of your lifetime. So, by that, I mean that, employers need to start working more carefully with their employees to better integrate service into learning and earning at all levels. We need to do a better job of making sure that we do things like service integrated work, whether it's internships or apprenticeships or in-service learning, like national service. Really, really important. I think, again, as individuals, as employers, we need to make sure that serving others is a part of that. This is not simply about some sort of perk of taking time off to volunteer. It's to integrate it into what you're actually doing. And so, to me, these integrated plans, these life plans, and developing a lifelong plan, not I'm going to learn now and then I'm going to go work and everything's going to be fine, but a lifelong plan of integrating learning, earning, and serving is going to be really important. In order to do that, for you as the individual, I think you do have to take the step to engage in the learning process. In other words, it's not going to come to you. We've seen significant declines in enrollment in higher education, particularly in community colleges, in this COVID period. This is unlike any other recession that we've seen in modern history, where typically a recession would hit and community college enrollment would increase because people were looking to retool and reskill themselves in this environment. COVID, I think, has injected a different element, the point that you were making, which is fear. And I think you've got to overcome that fear by seizing the mantle, seizing the narrative for yourself, and saying, here's what I'm going to do to make a difference in my life, in my workplace, in my community.
Jamie, I can't think of a more powerful note to end on than that. I want to thank you so much for your help in helping College Promise think through these issues. Lumina has been a wonderful partner for us as well. And so thank you and your team for that. And your continued leadership and generosity as we tackle these issues as a country. My guess is that there's going to be a lot more collaboration still to come. And I hear not only optimism, but for unity of effort across all of these industries and silos as we come together to rise to the challenge. So thank you, Jamie, very much for all
Thank you, Rosye. And as Dr. Biden said, we went from 50 to 300. Let's get to 3,000 College Promise community. Let's aim for it.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Thank you
Well,
so much for having me.
thank you so much. And for all of you tuning in right now, next up, we have some Power Talks hosted by Jobs for the Future, Working Nation, and the Committee of 100. And later on today, Mike Siegelman, CEO of Burning Glass, and Jay Kirsch-Allen, higher education lead at LinkedIn, will also be on to talk about ways technology is helping to prepare future workers. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your day.